to Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Shifarao Lako, and do stay with us. Now, the House of People's Representatives yesterday voted for an early end to a 6-month state of emergency, which is effective immediately. It is to be recalled that the Council of Ministers decided to remove the state of emergency ahead of its expiration and sent the proposal to the House for approval. Kasaon Chani has the following story.
Council of Ministers has recently decided to remove 6 months state of emergency ahead of its expiration and send the proposal to the House of People's Representatives for the approval. After deliberating on the matter, the House of People's Representatives has lifted the state of emergency as per Proclamation number 1264/2014. According to Tesfaye Beljiga, Chief Government Whip, the lifting of the state of emergency takes into consideration the significant change in a status quo.
So far, it was noted that there was severe challenge hovering over the nation, that the government had given due attention to prevent the nation from any crisis, which as a result, the Council of Ministers declared the state of emergency follows the Constitution Article 93, Sub-Article 1. However, these days, there is a stability of peace and security across the nation, and would like to lift the state of emergency. The state of emergency was inherently restrictive, unsuitable for the country's image, and that Ethiopia's current situation is relatively peaceful compared to what it was months ago.
Some members of the House of People's Representatives have urged the government be cautious after the lifting of the state of emergency.
Concerning the lifting of the state of emergency, it has already brought significant change compared to the recent situation across the country. And for that, there were various efforts undertaken by the government. However, by the time now, there are security problems in some parts of Amhara, Afar, and Oromia. Some groups are creating havoc and discouraging the community to reside peacefully, and supporting the government as well. Therefore, the government ought to work around those areas more than ever to ensure the identity and survival and social well-being issues of the community by giving due emphasis.
The House of People's Representatives has lifted a state of emergency after it has been in place for the past 3.5 months.
Now, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Ambassador Dina Mufti, says the draft bill entitled HR 6600 threatens to regress the peace initiatives that the government of Ethiopia has been undertaking so far. Ambassador Dina told the Ethiopian news agency that the bill calls for the imposition of sanctions and unwarranted measures against the people and government of Ethiopia, undermining all the positive steps taken to ensure peace in the country. Ethiopian American Civic Council has also called the draft bill draconian and imbalanced. Well, dear viewers, let's now turn our attention to trending stories that we observed. And in this regard, I'm joined here in the studio by my colleague, Goshu Malso, to help us shed some light on some issues that he observed. Goshu, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Shifi.
Now, what are some of the issues that you observed?
Okay, over the past 24 hours, various media outlets just give media coverage that Amnesty International unveiled its report, Terrorist TPLF killed and gang raped civilians. According to its report, Tigrayan forces deliberately killed and gang raped dozens of women and girls into towns in the Amhara region last year. The Human Rights Watchdog tried to verify the atrocities by interviewing 30 raped survivors and satellite imagery. And according to this report, as young as 14 and victims of violence to get a sense of the atrocities that have been carried out during 15-month war in areas including China, in Amhara region, in Kobo. A mother just raped in front of her son, in front of her husband, and the like. You can imagine how the psychological impact on these victims in the areas where it invaded. And in a report published on Wednesday, Amnesty said it spoke victims in August and September after rebels from the Tigray People's Liberation TPLF seized control of the towns. In the areas where it invaded, TPLF in Amhara and Afar caused mass destruction, looted properties, and the others.
Yeah.
All these atrocities are committed by the TPLF according to the report. According to the report. And about half the victims of sexual violence said they were gang raped. And with doctors telling Amnesty that some survivors had suffered deep wounds and cuts. One schoolgirl told to the human rights group that she and her mother were raped by TPLF fighters who said the attacks were in revenge, that is a retaliatory act for abuse committed against their own families. She also told one of them raped me in courtyard and other raped my mother inside the house, she told the right groups. My mother is very sick, now she is very depressed and desperate. We don't speak about what happened. It is impossible, it says, the report. As you remember, the Ethiopian government has been asking the international human rights group to investigate the atrocities independently. And the Amnesty International came up with these reports. And it is to be recalled that the UN Human Rights Commission and Ethiopian Human Rights Commission released the joint investigation in last November, despite the TPLF rejected the report. And all these atrocities are committed by the terrorist TPLF according to the Amnesty International report. We will have detailed information in our detailed development in our evening news hour. I would like to remind our viewers to watch us during that time. Thank you, Shipping.
All right, thank you, Goshu. Thank you so much.
It is the right time to reform and revitalize the United Nations system to reflect current global realities and ensure that it is a more representative and equitable body. With our Esluini Consensus of 2005, we should collectively insist that Africa's reasonable request for no less than 2 permanent seats and 5 non-permanent seats in the UN Security Council be adopted.
Welcome back. You are still watching Addis News Hour. Now, Ethiopia has been in a state of prolonged instability following long-running conflicts. These conflicts and instability have caused significant human and material damage, and efforts have been made to address these issues and to hold consultations at national level in order to safeguard the unity of the people and the country. And a commission has been set up to carry out this national dialogue, and the selection of commissioners is nearing completion. And staying with ETV, beg your pardon, Tasfaye Bazabe, a researcher in Strategic Affairs Institute, says the commissioners have a great role to play for the success of the commission.
እንደሚታወቀው ኢትዮጵያ በታሪኳ ውስጥ ብዙ ግጭቶችን በውስጥም በውጭም ስታስተናግድ ነበረች።
We all need to contribute to the success of this national conciliation. I believe that the national conciliation will be successful if it is conducted with the participation of all parties. As you know, we have experienced various conflicts in the country. Our differences are widening and our unity is diminishing. Now, instead of doing so, there is an agenda that works for the unity of the citizens. I personally appreciate the steps that the government is taking to maintain the integrity of the country and the unity of its citizens. I hope that it will be a solution to our ongoing conflicts and a solution to our common problems. We have also done extensive research on the subject at our institution. It can be used at any time by the committee, as it is a research that clearly identified the benefits of participation of political, economic and other elites in the national dialogue. The conciliation must be inclusive, and we must all work together for its success.
እጅግ የሚጠበቅ አካታች የሆነ ተአማኒነት ያለው
He also says Ethiopia has a lot to learn from the successes and failures of other countries.
በተለይ ለኢትዮጵያ ትልቅ ተሞክሮ ይሆናል ብለን የምናየው
South Africa and Rwanda are the biggest examples for Ethiopia in this regard. In this, we see how Africa has taken its own solutions to its own problems and made them successful. In particular, the two countries considered it a solution to their problems and successful national conciliation. Our country can learn a great deal from this. Frequent conflicts can hamper our development plans and drag us back. These countries have been successful in conducting national conciliation to address the challenges they face. I believe that Ethiopia will have a successful national conciliation by learning from the lessons learned from these countries.
ኢትዮጵያም ላይ የሚካሄደው የብሔራዊ ምክክር መድረክ እጅግ በጣም ውጤታማ ይሆናል ብዬ እምነት አለኝ።
The atrocities which the Italian fascists committed during the 1930s and the 1920s in Libya are not generally known. And the reason they're not generally known is that none of the war criminals ever went to trial.
ሳር ቤቱን በሳት እያቀጣጠሉ ከማቀጣጠላቸው ውጪ አልቀጣጠል ለሞሲላቸው ቤንዚንና ናፍጣ እያርከፈከፉ እዛ ውስጥ ያሉት የተደበቁት እሳት ላያቸው ላይ ያለ ለመሸሽ ሲወጡ እነሱን እንደገና በአካፋ ተገደለበት። ይሄ አረመኔነት የኢትዮጵያ ወንድሞቻችን አባቶቻችን ያላግባብ የተገደሉ
So far, the only two we know of who actually threw the grenades was Mogus Askodom and Alfred Bosch.
Now, moving on, the month of February holds a special place in the history of Ethiopian struggle against foreign invaders. It was in this historical month that Ethiopians marched up north to Adwa and mowed down the Italian aggressors. Also in this month, a tragic 3-day-long massacre took place here in Addis Ababa in 1937, when the forces of Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, the Italian viceroy to Ethiopia, unleashed terror. Alula Teklemariam has produced the following story in this regard.
Yekatit 12 is designated as Martyrs' Day in Ethiopia with a clear determination of commemorating those who lost their lives by the direct command of the Italian viceroy to Ethiopia in the 1930s, Marshal Rodolfo Graziani.
Graziani was one of the very few people who was loyal to his boss, Mussolini. So he collaborated with Hitler. He remained loyal to fascism. When the rest of the country forgot about fascism almost overnight. So he was imprisoned for continuing to collaborate with Adolf Hitler after the rest of the government had changed its policy.
Italy invaded Ethiopia during the reign of Benito Mussolini because of the Adwa complex about 40 years ago. The Italians were determined to avenge their defeat at Adwa, with the rise of fascism emboldening them. Graziani announced he would personally distribute arms to the poor on Friday, 19 February at the Ganeta Lul Palace up to 6 kilo. In the crowd that formed that Friday morning were two young Eritreans living in Ethiopia named Abraha Dobuch and Moges Asgedom found the opportunity to kill Graziani and thus threw grenade, but wounding him. Swift with reprisal, the Italians killed Ethiopians with daggers and truncheons. They doused native houses with petrol and set them on fire.
Italian invaders massacred over 30,000 residents of the city of Addis Ababa, burned down homes and dragged them alive by cars. Consequently, the street of Addis Ababa was filled by blood. Besides, it killed innocent monks and nuns in the monasteries.
In 3 terror-filled days and nights of arson, murder and looting, thousands of innocent and unsuspecting men, women and children were roasted alive, shot, stabbed to death, or blown to pieces with hand grenades on the 12th day of Yekatit 1929 Ethiopian calendar. Thus, Ethiopians commit the day every year in remembrance of those who sacrificed their lives for being Ethiopians. Martyrs' Day is observed in the presence of high-ranking government officials, various international personalities, and diplomats. Many believe that Remembrance Day is additional springboard for an African victory against European colonial powers in many parts of African countries in 1960s. It is believed to be a national event to pay tribute for the infamous Addis Ababa massacre of Yekatit 12 and to ensure that Ethiopian brave forefathers who have sacrificed themselves to protect the sovereignty of the country will never be forgotten. It is a special day to express patriotic feeling against the Italian fascist aggression. It paves a scene of pride and it gives opportunity to open dialogue with other nations to ensure that similar histories should not be repeated. Rising dramatically from the roundabout to Kilo is this moving monument dedicated to the thousands of innocent Ethiopians killed by the Italians. The monument represents a white obelisk where the scenes of massacre and the funerals of the victims are depicted.
Martyrs Monument or Yekatit 12. The obelisk, monument, was inaugurated on February 1942 in memory of the citizens of Addis Ababa killed in the Italian fascist massacre of February 1937, and it tells the world, and reminds Ethiopians, about the wild acts and genocide of the fascist Italians through Graziani, by two Ethiopians, in February 1937 provoked the Italian to unleash a 3-day reign of terror in the course of which thousands of innocent Ethiopian citizens, including aged people, children, and pregnant women were killed in cold blood by bayonets, guns, spades, and many of houses burnt down. The entire horror and terrorist action befallen on the citizens of Addis Ababa is depicted in bas-relief on the 28-meter of the monument made by two Yugoslavia architects. In addition, the massacre was narrated by bronze letters carved on open book-like stones on 4 directions around the obelisk. Every year, people of Addis Ababa celebrate this day. The monument represents a white obelisk where the scenes of massacre and the funerals of the victims are depicted. This monument is also called the Monument of Martyrs or 6 Kilo, 6 kilometer, that is, the name of the quarter where the monument is located.
Now, Ethiopia and Kenya have agreed to ensure peace and security along their common borders. They are crucial for economic integration of the two countries. Ethiopian Federal Police Commissioner General Demalash Gebra Mikael held talks with his Kenyan counterpart Hilary Nzioki Mutiambai. The two sides discussed ways of working together to combat terrorism along the border areas. General Mutiambai said the officials have agreed to cooperate in ensuring peace and security along the border areas. The two sides have agreed to share information, training and capacity building between the two police institutions. Commissioner General Demalash also said that the countries have agreed to take joint operations against terrorist groups OLF Shene and Al-Shabaab, which caused damage along the Ethio-Kenyan border. Ethiopia has launched the second round of COVID-19 vaccination campaign. In her media briefing, the Health Minister Liat Adessa disclosed that the COVID-19 vaccination campaign will be executed for the upcoming 2 weeks, targeting population of 12 years and above. Some 10 million people were vaccinated in the first round of the campaign in March 2021. Over 20 million doses of vaccine have been prepared for the second round, she added. During the campaign, people who did not get the first vaccine and those who did not get the second dose will also be vaccinated, she underlined. Now, in business, crude oil exploration efforts in Ethiopia date back to the regime of Haile Selassie. Ethiopian diaspora communities have been called on to venture on investing on oil refinery. Tigist Sarnisa reports.
The much talked about Oil Week will be celebrated the coming week. Extraction of oil in Ethiopia dates back to the 1920s.
Ethiopia started looking for exploration of crude oil since 1920, and about 6-7 multinational companies had been participated. Ethiopia started being serious in exploration during His Majesty Haile Selassie reign. So a lot of companies were about to get oil, but because of the conspiracy behind, because of the Western's pressure and Western's allies and the Arabs, so far we didn't get any oil in hand.
Currently, Ethiopia is being challenged with shortage of oil in the capital, Addis Ababa. It was emphasized that oil demand can be met.
We can solve our oil needs by establishing a refinery in Gambella. This is my project idea.
The oil industry expert underlines that Ethiopian diaspora need to eye on investing on oil refinery.
The time which will take to construct a refinery is a maximum of 2 years, and there are already diaspora team who are very much interested, very experienced, very educated, and I'm speaking representing this team. So this is the whole idea. So the government, maybe they might see it, but just reminding them. Especially Ethiopia this time in a crisis, and the price of the retail price of oil, pump price I mean, is going to be up to 50 birr as per the media I heard. This is a very challenging and a very critical situation, leads the whole Ethiopian population, because oil goes everywhere.
It was indicated that fuel usage locally can be reduced by using public transport and from the government side by taking influential measures on black market criminals. Synergetic cooperation with neighboring countries such as South Sudan can also be part of addressing oil-related challenges faced regionally, it was learned.
You're still watching our Disney News Hour, and now let's take a quick look at the exchange rates of some currencies, and I'll be right back.
Good morning, welcome. It's 92.5 Enugu's A Dream FM. My name is Jude. Today we are discussing the 1999 Constitution and challenges solutions to insecurity in sectors. The internet has stories to track. River state governments and parliamentary workers in Nigeria.
Now and then, riders and nimble. I pledge to Coal City with all my strength. To my landlord, I promise to pay my rent. Represent, never ever gonna relent. Money come, Coal City's where I'm gonna invest. Cause 102, I rep 042. Two abundant was yeba. Boy, they are taught many when go they like, oh, go for, Teji Maka. Go for, Timo Panaka. Cause he Mwaka. And you beg it for Mwaka.
This is Enugu, the Coal City State, also known as 042. It is the most beautiful and planned city in the entire southeastern region of Nigeria and one of the most beautiful cities in Nigeria. Enugu is home to over 700,000 people and takes pride in her green landscape, serene ambience, peace-loving residents, and highly nutritious foods. Ogiri Road is a socio-economic hub in the city. It is home to Enugu Rangers Football Club home stadium, the Nnamdi Azikiwe Stadium. Also,
Now moving to continental news, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area AfCFTA is set to establish a legal framework to build Africa's first generic drug industry. The body is expected to capture all the intellectual property right protocols and reform to allow for the establishment of the drug industry. Shagai Mata has more on that from CGTN.
Africa's vulnerability to the disruption of international supply chains during the COVID-19 pandemic has hit hard, with two-thirds of African countries being net importers of food and medicine. Global trade restrictions and cross-border blockages are reported to have created shortages. The AfCFTA is now looking into the possibility of producing vaccines to help the continent cope with the future pandemics.
What we are looking the AfCFTA to do is to provide the legal framework for the production of vaccines, the legal framework for the production of, not only for this pandemic, but for other pandemics, as well as the legal framework for the establishment of a generic drug industry. This is what we've learned from this crisis, this public health crisis.
According to the AfCFTA Secretary General, fundamental progress has been made in trade promotion despite the impacts of COVID-19.
We have made progress in establishing the legal frameworks that are required in order to enable commercially meaningful trade. We have also established an adjustment fund, an initial amount of $1 billion, which will enable us to make sure that countries that need the support as they experience short-term revenue losses, that they have the support to offset those losses.
As African countries focus on managing the health crisis, the immediate need remains finalizing the AfCFTA agreement. So far, 40 African countries have ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, with the recent ratification of Tanzania.
And finally, let's take a quick look at the weather updates of some African countries. You have been watching our Disney News Hour, and now let's wrap up.